At 7:42 on Saturday night, my roommate was standing in our kitchen in a black dress I had never seen before, checking her phone while another man waited downstairs. Her screen lit up with, "Here. Gray SUV by the hydrant." Claire read it, reached for her purse, and I heard myself say, "He couldn't make it all the way to the door?" She stopped. "Excuse me." I opened the refrigerator. Nothing. Very modern, curbside dating. Claire stared at me, put her purse back on the counter, and said, "You know what? I'm tired of this." Before I could ask what she meant, she called him. "Hey Mark, I'm sorry but I'm not coming down." "No, you didn't do anything. I just shouldn't have said yes tonight." She ended the call and looked straight at me. "Are you still doing nothing?" "My name is Noah Walker." I was 33, a commercial interior designer, and until that moment, I had believed I understood how people used space. Claire Sullivan had been my roommate for 11 months, and apparently I had spent most of that time misunderstanding our apartment. "Doing nothing about what?" I asked. Claire laughed once without humor. "This, you and me. Whatever this is." I glanced toward the living room. "You just canceled a date because I made one stupid comment." "No, I canceled because I'm tired of sitting across from men I barely want to know, while wondering whether the man I already know is ever going to admit he wants me." That shut me up. Claire managed operations for 3 restaurants, which meant indecision was something she treated like a preventable workplace injury. But she did not look angry. She looked tired. "I'm not asking you to propose in the kitchen," she said. "I'm asking whether you plan to keep acting like my boyfriend in every way that doesn't require you to say you're my boyfriend." I opened my mouth, but she kept going. "You know my coffee order. You know which nights I get home too late to cook, so there's somehow enough dinner for 2. You hate every guy I date before you meet him. But when I ask why, suddenly you're Switzerland. Then Friday comes and we end up on the couch, sharing takeout while you call it roommate stuff." The problem was that she was not exaggerating much. We had started as strangers splitting rent, because Chicago was expensive. Somewhere along the way, we invented what Claire called roommate policy. Whoever finished the coffee replaced it. Whoever cooked avoided dishes. No work complaints before the first drink on Friday. We argued about thermostat settings, stole food from each other's plates, and knew from the sound of the front door when the other had had a bad day. I treated all of it as harmless, because living together gave me a convenient rule. Do not complicate the lease. Except the lease was not the real reason anymore. I had been attracted to Claire for months. I liked the way she could finish a brutal shift and still laugh at something stupid. I liked that she asked real questions about my work, instead of calling interior design decorating. I liked that she could disagree with me without making it personal. And yes, I noticed her in dresses, like the one she was wearing now. I had simply decided wanting her did not require action. Crossing the roommate line could destroy the best home either of us had had in years. And I had called waiting the responsible choice. Claire picked up her phone and opened an email. "I found a studio in Logan Square." I stared at her. "What?" "I saw it Thursday. I applied yesterday." That hit harder than the canceled date. "You're moving?" "Our lease ends in 5 weeks. We talked about renewing. We talked about maybe renewing." She locked her phone. "I'm not moving because I'm angry. I need my own place." "Since when?" "Since I realized I'm arranging my dating life around coming home to you." I stepped away from the refrigerator. "That sounds like something we should have discussed before you applied." Her eyebrows lifted. "Why?" "You're my roommate." The word landed exactly as she intended. "That's not fair. Neither is getting jealous every time I go out, and then acting like I invented the tension between us." "I'm not jealous every time." "You called Daniel a human podcast ad. He sold cryptocurrency courses. You hated him before you knew that." I almost smiled, but she didn't. "This is what I mean, Noah. You get the closeness, the concern, all the little domestic things. But the second I ask what any of it means, you become extremely reasonable." That irritated me because it was accurate. "What do you want me to do right now?" Claire shook her head. "Wrong question." She picked up her purse, kicked off the heels she had worn for the date, and carried them toward her room. "I don't want you to panic because I found an apartment." I don't want a kitchen confession because Mark is downstairs feeling awkward, and I'm not canceling my application because you suddenly discovered urgency. She stopped at the hallway. I just needed to stop pretending I'm completely available when half my life already feels like it belongs to something neither of us will name. She went into her room and closed the door without slamming it. I stayed in the kitchen beside two untouched glasses, because 20 minutes earlier I had poured water for both of us, while she got ready. Around me were pieces of a life I had stopped noticing. Her yellow kettle on my stove, her cookbooks mixed with mine, the throw blanket she bought, because she said my gray couch looked emotionally unavailable. None of those things proved we belonged together. That was the point. I had spent months using ordinary domestic closeness as evidence that nothing needed to change. 5 weeks. I had always assumed there would be a cleaner moment later, maybe after the lease, or after one of us moved for some unrelated reason. Now that future had arrived as a studio application, and I hated it. Not because I was losing a roommate. I could find another roommate. I hated the idea of coming home and not knowing whether Claire would be there, of Friday nights becoming something I had to ask for, instead of something that simply happened. For the first time, the question was not whether I wanted Claire. I already knew that answer. The question was whether I wanted her enough to choose her, before the home we had accidentally built disappeared. The next morning, Claire was already at the kitchen table. When I came out of my room, barefoot, hair pulled into a loose knot, coffee beside her laptop. The black dress from the night before was gone, and somehow that made what had happened feel more serious, not less. I poured coffee, stood across from her and said, "I want to take you to dinner Friday." Claire looked up slowly. "We eat dinner together, all the time. Not like roommates." She closed the laptop. "Say it properly." I knew exactly what she was doing, and for once I did not resent it. "I'm asking you on a date." She watched me for another second, then nodded. "Okay. Friday." I deliberately chose a neighborhood on the other side of the city. No familiar bartender, no restaurant where we had ordered takeout, no easy walk back to our apartment if things became uncomfortable. Claire noticed immediately. "You took me 40 minutes away so we couldn't accidentally become roommates again?" she asked as we walked toward the restaurant. I wanted neutral territory. That sounds very romantic. I considered arbitration. She laughed and some of the tension I had carried all week loosened. Claire wore dark jeans and a fitted green top, nothing as dramatic as the dress from Saturday. But I noticed her more because I was finally allowed to. Or maybe because I had finally admitted that I always had. The restaurant lost our reservation because of a computer problem, which should have annoyed me more than it did. Instead, Claire looked at the crowded waiting area and said, "Roommate policy says we abandon any restaurant where the wait is longer than the menu. That policy was created because you hate waiting. All good laws have a history." We ended up at a small Korean place 2 blocks away with 6 tables and no reservations at all. Claire ordered for us, after I admitted I had never been there, then informed me that choosing the least spicy option was a character weakness. 10 minutes later, she was drinking half my water because she had dramatically overestimated her own tolerance. "I want this entered into the official record," I said. "There is no record. I'm starting one." It felt familiar, but the context changed everything. When Claire reached across the table to steal a piece of meat from my plate, I caught her wrist lightly before she got it. Normally, that would have become another argument about food ownership. This time neither of us moved for a second. Her eyes dropped to my hand, then back to my face. I let her go slowly. "You're acting weird," she said. "I'm trying not to. That's worse." I smiled. "You told me to do something." I meant emotionally. Very unclear instructions. She shook her head, but her mouth curved. After dinner, we walked without any real destination. That was when the evening stopped feeling like an experiment and started feeling like something I wanted, regardless of what happened with the apartment. Claire stopped to help an older woman who had dropped a grocery bag near a crosswalk, then spent 5 minutes arguing with me about whether a bakery window displaying 12 identical cakes was elegant or unsettling. I had known all those pieces of her before, but seeing them outside our shared home changed the way they fit together. Claire was not attractive because she made my apartment feel lived in. She was attractive because she moved through the world with the same confidence and humor she brought home. We ended up sitting on a low wall near a park while traffic moved past us. Claire looked down at her hands. Can I ask you something without you designing the answer first? That depends entirely on the question. Do you actually want me, or do you just hate the idea of me moving out? I had expected some version of it. What surprised me was how much the answer mattered to me. I want you, I said. I also hate the idea of you moving out. Those are both true. She looked at me. How do you know they're separate? I thought about the restaurant, the walk, the way I had watched her laugh at something stupid while neither of us was standing in our kitchen. Because I've liked being here with you for the last 3 hours, and none of it required rent. Claire smiled, but there was still caution behind it. I wondered about that too. About me? About myself. She leaned back on her hands. What if I only wanted you, because you were always there, because you knew what groceries I bought, and which nights I'd be exhausted and when to leave me alone? I considered that. And I still want you. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything dramatic would have. Claire looked away for a second. That's why the apartment thing matters. I need to know this can exist without convenience doing half the work. I did not tell her to cancel the studio application. I wanted to. Part of me still believed that if we admitted what was happening, the logical next step was preserving the arrangement that had created it. But that would have answered the wrong question. So I said, keep the application. Claire turned toward me, clearly surprised. You mean that? I don't like it. That sounds more believable. But if the only reason this works is because you're 12 feet away, then we should find that out before we call it something bigger. We stood to head back toward the train, and somewhere between the park and the corner, Claire reached for my hand. She did not make a joke about it. Neither did I. At the station entrance, I stopped before we went down the stairs. She looked at me. What? I had spent months imagining what kissing Claire might be like, under conditions far more cinematic than fluorescent transit lighting. Apparently, waiting for the right atmosphere was another habit I could afford to lose. I touched her cheek and kissed her. Claire made a quiet, surprised sound, then stepped closer and kissed me back with one hand curling into the front of my jacket. It was not tentative for long. When we finally separated, she stayed close enough that I could see the smile she was trying not to show. So, she said, still doing nothing? I'm improving. Slowly. You're very demanding for someone who canceled another man's date. She laughed and kissed me once more, quicker this time. When we got home, the apartment immediately tried to pull us back into old habits. Claire kicked off her shoes, dropped onto our couch, and automatically lifted her feet so I could sit at the other end. I almost did, then both of us noticed what was happening. She lowered her legs. This is weird. We've sat here 1,000 times. Exactly. I looked around the room, suddenly aware that we had built an entire language of closeness without ever deciding which parts we were actually choosing. Claire glanced toward the hallway where her room sat across from mine. Maybe that's what we figure out next. I nodded. The date had answered one question. I wanted Claire outside the apartment too. But coming home with her made the next question harder. Because now we had to find out which parts of us were real when convenience stopped making the decisions. The next morning, the couch looked exactly the same, which was inconvenient because Claire and I had spent half the night realizing we could not keep using it the same way. We had kissed twice, gone to our separate bedrooms, and agreed on almost nothing, except that neither of us wanted to slide back into the comfortable version of us where closeness happened automatically, and nobody had to choose it. At 10:13, Claire walked into the kitchen holding her phone and said, "The studio approved me." I looked up from my coffee. That was fast. Apparently my credit score is more decisive than we are. She tried to smile, but I could see what the email meant to her. The apartment was no longer an idea. If she paid the deposit by Tuesday, it would be hers. My first instinct was embarrassingly predictable. When do you want to start packing? Claire blinked. That's your response? You have 5 weeks. If you're taking the studio, there's no reason to wait until the last weekend. I was already mentally dividing the apartment into categories when she put her phone on the counter. Noah, I stopped. You don't have to project manage my departure because you don't know what else to do with it. That irritated me enough that I almost argued, then I realized she was right. Helping was how I handled uncertainty. Give me furniture to move, a room to measure, a problem with dimensions, and I could become extremely useful without saying anything difficult. I do want to help, I said. I know. And I'll let you. Just don't turn being useful into the entire conversation. We made coffee, and eventually came up with a rule that sounded absurd until we tried it. For the remaining weeks, we would stop assuming. No automatic dinners because we were both home. No default Friday night on the couch. No walking into the other person's plans, just because we shared an address. If one of us wanted time together, we had to ask. Claire called it the temporary suspension of roommate policy. I called it bureaucratic overreach. By Monday evening, I hated it. I came home at 7 and found her making pasta. Normally, I would have grabbed a plate without discussion, because she always cooked too much. Instead, I stood by the counter while she stirred sauce and asked, "Are you feeding me? Or is that no longer covered under the treaty?" She looked over her shoulder. "Do you want to eat with me?" "Yes." Then yes. It was ridiculous that 4 words could make dinner feel different, but they did. The same thing happened with everything else. Wednesday, Claire texted me from work and asked if I wanted to meet her for a drink, instead of simply telling me when she would be home. Thursday, I asked if she wanted to watch a documentary I knew she would mock, and she said no because she needed an early night. For 11 months, I had assumed availability because her door was there. Now I had to risk hearing no. The surprising part was that the yeses became better. When Claire came home Friday and asked if I wanted tacos with her, I knew she had chosen my company rather than simply fallen into the easiest option. Packing started that weekend. Claire began with books, winter clothes, framed photographs, and the decorative things I had spent months pretending not to have opinions about. I helped tape boxes while she sat cross-legged on the floor making piles. "That lamp is mine," she said. "Obviously. You once called it structurally offensive. It leans. It has character. It has scoliosis." She pointed a roll of packing tape at me. "You are a terrible person." Occupational honesty. The joke landed normally, but when she carried the lamp toward the growing stack marked studio, the corner where it had stood looked unexpectedly empty. The kitchen was worse. Claire opened cabinets and started separating pans, glasses, serving bowls, and appliances. I watched her place the yellow kettle into a box and said, "Wait." She looked at me. "What? That stays here. Why?" "Because it lives here." "No, I bought it." "I know, but you don't even drink tea that often. Neither do you." "That is not relevant." She crossed her arms, amused now. "Are you emotionally attached to my kettle?" "I'm objecting to unnecessary disruption." "You designed restaurants for a living. You can survive a different kettle." I reached into the box and lifted it out. "We've had this argument before." "No, we haven't." "Exactly. Because nobody ever considered where the kettle belonged." The sentence came out more seriously than I intended. Claire's smile faded. I set it on the counter. Around us were all the things we had stopped identifying as hers or mine, because they had been used together for so long. Her cutting board, my knives, her mixing bowls, my coffee grinder, a set of wine glasses neither of us remembered buying. We had built a shared life in small pieces, and then acted as if the absence of a label meant none of it counted. Claire leaned against the counter. "This is why I still need to move." I looked at her. "Even if this works, especially if it works." She gestured between us. "I don't want us to decide we're good together because separating the kitchen feels sad." I started to object, but she continued. "I want to know you'll call me when I'm not already in the next room. I want to know I'll come see you because I want you, not because my couch is 10 feet away from yours." She looked toward the boxes. "And I need to know I can build a place that's mine without that meaning I'm leaving you." I understood the logic and disliked almost every practical consequence of it. "So you're definitely taking the studio?" "Yes." The word hurt more cleanly than I expected. Claire saw it and stepped closer, But she did not apologize. I was glad she didn't. She had not done anything wrong. I want this, she said quietly, touching 2 fingers to my chest. Whatever we're becoming. But I also want the apartment. I covered her hand with mine. Okay? She studied my face. Okay because you agree? No. Okay because I heard you, and I'm not going to turn disagreeing into a campaign. That earned a small smile. I put the yellow kettle back into her box myself. Claire watched me do it, then kissed me once, slow and warm, before returning to the cabinets. The kitchen looked worse by the hour. So did the living room. Somehow, though the more our accidental shared life came apart physically, the clearer the deliberate parts became. I kept asking Claire out. She kept asking me over to her side of the couch, when she actually wanted me there. Neither of us was disappearing. By Sunday night, 6 boxes were stacked beside the front door, and for the first time I understood that choosing Claire could not mean convincing her to remain 12 feet away. She was leaving. The question was what I intended to build with her. Once proximity stopped doing any of the work for us, by the following Friday, Claire's apartment had started looking less like a home and more like a warehouse with plumbing. Boxes lined one wall of the living room. The bookshelf had 3 empty shelves, and the yellow kettle was gone from the kitchen counter. Her move was 8 days away. I had known that date for weeks, but seeing the apartment physically dismantled made it feel different. That evening, Claire came home carrying groceries and found me standing in front of the refrigerator, trying to decide what counted as dinner. "Roommate policy violation," she said, setting the bags down. "You're staring at ingredients without a plan. Roommate policy is suspended." "Then boyfriend probation policy." I looked at her. "That sounds legally questionable. You're a designer. Stay in your lane." She had bought ingredients for the pasta we used to make on lazy Fridays. But this time neither of us pretended the meal had happened, simply because we shared a kitchen. "Do you actually want to eat together?" I asked. Claire paused while taking tomatoes from a bag, then smiled. "Yes. Do you?" "Yes. Look at us, communicating like people with separate utility bills." I started chopping garlic while she worked beside me. The rhythm came back immediately, except now every familiar movement carried the awareness that soon this kitchen would belong to one person again. Claire reached behind me for olive oil, and I moved aside automatically before she had to ask. "You know," she said, "that is the one thing I'm going to miss. My spatial awareness. You getting out of my way." Very romantic. We ate at the small table near the windows, while evening traffic moved below us. For most of dinner, we talked about normal things. A client of mine wanted an office lobby redesigned around the phrase, "future forward warmth," which Claire declared meaningless. One of her restaurants had lost a freezer for 3 hours, and somehow survived. We argued about whether buying dessert counted as planning ahead. The conversation was easy enough that I understood why I had spent so long protecting this version of us. It was good. It had always been good. The mistake had been assuming that changing the label would destroy what worked, instead of asking whether the label had already stopped describing it. After dinner, Claire carried our plates to the sink. I watched her rinse them and said, "I'm not asking you to stay." She turned off the water and looked back at me. That came out of nowhere. "Not really." I leaned against the counter. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing to know this works when the apartment isn't doing half the work." Claire dried her hands slowly. "Okay. For a while, I thought the right answer was proving you didn't need to move. Like if I finally admitted I wanted you, then preserving this place would somehow prove I meant it." She turned toward me fully. I continued, before I could make the explanation cleaner than it needed to be. "But asking you to stay would answer the wrong question. I don't want you because you live here. I don't want a relationship because replacing you as a roommate sounds miserable." Claire's mouth twitched. "Touching. I worked hard on that. I can tell." I stepped closer. "I want you when I have to make plans. I want you when I have to call. I want you when I can't assume Friday belongs to me just because you're sitting 10 feet away." Claire searched my face. "Noah, let me finish before I accidentally become responsible again." That got a small laugh from her. "I want to be your boyfriend." Her expression went still. I could feel my pulse in my throat, But I kept going. You move next Saturday. I help you because you asked me to. Then I take you to dinner that night. Afterward, you go home to your apartment and I go home to mine. And Sunday, if I want to see you, I call you like a man who actually has a girlfriend, instead of wandering into the kitchen and hoping she's there. For several seconds, Claire did not say anything. I wondered whether I had somehow misread the entire last month, which would have been impressive considering she had once canceled a date in front of me and demanded action. Then, she crossed the distance between us. You cleared Saturday? She asked. The entire day. For my move? For your move first. Dinner after. You hate moving. Everyone hates moving. You complained for 3 days when you helped me rearrange this couch. The couch is badly designed. You picked it. That is irrelevant. Claire smiled, but her eyes had gone bright. I want that too. I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. She put her hands on my chest. But I'm still taking the studio, I know. And I'm not moving back in 6 weeks because dating is going well. I wasn't going to ask. Good. She paused. Probably. That was unnecessary. Her smile widened. I need you to understand something too. Moving out isn't a test. I'm not going to sit in Logan Square waiting to see whether you visit enough to prove something. Good. If I want to see you, I'll ask. If I want to stay over, I'll ask. If something bothers me, I'm going to try saying it before I cancel another man in our kitchen. I'd appreciate that. I reached for her waist and pulled her closer. So we're doing this? Claire tilted her head. Define doing this, Mr. Interior Designer. Exclusive dating, separate addresses, excessive debate about restaurant choices. And roommate policy? Retired. She looked genuinely offended. Absolutely not. You're moving out. Policies can evolve. Fine. Relationship policy. That sounds terrible. You named it. I'm revising. I kissed her before she could invent another category. Claire laughed against my mouth, then kissed me back with enough force to make me step against the counter. This was not our first kiss anymore, and neither of us treated it like a revelation. That made it better. There was no dramatic question waiting behind it. Claire knew I wanted her. I knew she wanted me. The important thing was that both of us had finally attached those feelings to choices that would still exist after her boxes were gone. Later, we finished packing the remaining kitchen shelves. I wrapped her wine glasses in newspaper while Claire labeled boxes with handwriting that became progressively less useful. One said kitchen. Another said important kitchen. The last one said things I'll blame Noah for breaking. Very mature, I said. Accountability matters in relationships. Those glasses cost $12. Sentimental value. You bought them at Target. We have memories. By 10, the apartment looked emptier than it had that morning. Claire sat on the floor beside a stack of boxes and leaned against the couch. I sat beside her. For once, neither of us rushed to make the room feel less temporary. Her head settled against my shoulder. It's going to be weird, she said. Yeah, you'll probably enjoy having the bathroom to yourself. Immediately, she elbowed me. I kissed the top of her head. I'm still going to miss you. Claire was quiet for a moment. Good. I looked down at her. Good, not because I want you miserable. She reached for my hand. Because missing me will mean you have to decide what to do about it. 8 days later, she would carry the last box out of our apartment. For the first time, I was not thinking about how to stop that from happening. I was thinking about what I would do after the door closed. And Claire was no longer simply there. Claire's move took most of Saturday, because apparently one woman could own enough kitchen equipment to supply a small restaurant. I arrived at 8 with coffee, packing tape, and the determination not to turn the day into a professional consultation. That last part became difficult the moment I saw her new studio. The main room was narrow, the windows were good, and whoever had positioned the electrical outlets had shown open hostility toward furniture. Claire caught me staring at one wall. Don't. I set down a box. I didn't say anything. Your face is redesigning my apartment. My face is concerned. My apartment does not need your concern. She pointed toward a stack labeled bedroom, despite the fact that technically there was no bedroom. Carry that. So I carried boxes. I assembled one bookshelf because she specifically asked me to, kept my opinions to myself, when she put the couch at an angle I would never have chosen, and only intervened when she tried to balance a lamp on a crate that was clearly not meant to support a lamp. By noon, her place had started looking like Claire rather than an empty rental. The yellow kettle sat on her stove, her cookbooks filled half a shelf. The leaning lamp I had insulted for 11 months stood proudly beside the couch. Watching her arrange everything should have felt like evidence that she was leaving me behind. Instead, it felt strangely right. This was her place, and I was there because she had invited me into it. The difficult moment came later, when we returned to the old apartment for the final load. Claire's room was empty, except for dust marks where the bed had stood, and one forgotten phone charger by the wall. She walked through the kitchen slowly, checking cabinets, then stopped beside the spot where the yellow kettle used to be. "This is weird," she said. I knew better than to tell her it was going to be fine. "Yeah." She looked toward the living room. "I wanted this. I know, I still want it. I know that too." She nodded and picked up the last box. Sadness did not have to mean the decision was wrong. And for once neither of us tried to make it mean anything more than that. After we carried the box downstairs, Claire handed me her old key. I looked at it in my palm longer than I should have. For 11 months, that key had meant she could walk through the same front door I did and be home. Now it was just a piece of metal she no longer needed. Claire watched me. "You're being dramatic about a key." I'm reflecting. "Dangerous." I slipped it into my pocket. "Dinner at 7? You still want to go out after moving furniture all day?" I booked the table. Her eyebrows lifted. "Of course you did. Some forms of personal growth have limits." She smiled and kissed me before getting into her car. I returned to the apartment alone for the first time that evening. The silence was immediate. No music from Claire's room, no cabinet closing in the kitchen, no voice asking whether I had eaten the leftovers she had been saving. I stood there with my keys in my hand and finally understood how easy it would have been to turn that silence into evidence that we had made a mistake. Instead, I took out my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. "I haven't even unpacked the bathroom yet." "That sounds serious. What do you want?" "To hear your voice." There was a short pause. Then she said softer, "Okay, I like that answer." I asked if 7 still worked. She said yes. The first few weeks were less cinematic than the month leading up to the move, which was exactly what we needed. Sometimes I drove to Logan Square after work. Sometimes Claire came to me and stayed late enough that going home seemed stupid, but she still went if she had an early shift. We had separate groceries again, separate laundry, separate electric bills. If I wanted to know how her day went, I had to call or ask instead of hearing it, because she happened to walk through the kitchen. I discovered that I missed some things less than expected, and others much more. I did not miss sharing bathroom storage. I did miss hearing her laugh from another room. The important habits survived because we kept choosing them. Friday dinners continued, but now one of us actually made the plan. Claire still stole food from my plate and claimed relationship policy allowed it. I informed her that relationship policy required written amendments. She said my objection had been denied. When one of us needed space, we said so. When one of us wanted company, we got better at asking, without creating some elaborate excuse around it. Claire never used the studio as a test to see whether I would pursue her, and I never treated visiting as proof I deserved credit. About a month after the move, someone knocked on my door at 7:30 on a Saturday evening. I opened it and forgot whatever I had been about to say. Claire stood there in a fitted dark blue dress, one hand holding a small purse, her hair down over her shoulders. For 1 second, I was back in the kitchen on the night everything started, watching her get ready for a date with another man, and pretending it did not bother me. Claire looked at my expression. "Problem?" I leaned against the doorframe. "You look familiar. Good familiar, potentially dangerous familiar." She smiled. "Your date is downstairs. That seems lazy. He couldn't come all the way to the door?" She narrowed her eyes. "Careful." I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. "Does he drive a gray SUV?" "No. He complains about furniture placement and thinks scheduling dinner reservations counts as spontaneity." "Sounds terrible." "He has moments." I took her coat from her arm and offered my hand. Claire looked down at it, then back at me. Are you finally ready? She asked. There was no frustration behind the question this time. No challenge. She already knew the answer. Yeah, I said. I am. She took my hand and we walked downstairs together. That was the part I had misunderstood from the beginning. Claire moving out did not end the home we had built. It forced us to find out which parts of it belonged to the apartment and which parts belonged to us. I had thought choosing her meant preserving what we already had. It turned out choosing her meant being willing to let the old arrangement end and still showing up when nothing made it automatic. If you were in Noah's place, would you have acted before Claire decided to move out, or would you have needed the deadline too? If you enjoyed Noah and Claire's story, leave a like, subscribe for more slow burn romance stories, and tell me what you would have done in the comments.
I think Claire moving out anyway is what made this story work for me. Because that's the exact point where it stopped being just another roommate romance. The easy ending would have been Noah finally admitting he wanted her, Claire canceling the studio, and both of them deciding they had solved the problem. But honestly, I think that would have missed the whole point. Claire wasn't moving because she didn't want Noah. She was moving because she wanted to know whether what they had was actually a relationship or just a really comfortable routine that had slowly started looking like one. And I completely understood that they already knew each other's schedules, ate together, spent Friday nights together, noticed when the other person had a bad day, and basically had all the benefits of being a couple without either one having to take the risk of actually choosing it. Noah especially got very comfortable with that arrangement. He could be jealous, protective, thoughtful, and emotionally invested, but the second Claire wanted him to define any of it, suddenly he became the most reasonable man in Chicago. That part made me laugh because Noah's way of dealing with uncomfortable feelings is apparently to become useful. Claire gets approved for the new apartment and his brain immediately goes to packing schedules. Something gets emotional and this man wants measurements, tape, boxes, and a plan. And I actually liked that Claire called him out on it. There's nothing wrong with being helpful, but sometimes being useful is a really convenient way to avoid saying what you actually feel. Noah could organize her entire move without ever admitting that watching her pack up that kitchen was hurting him. The yellow kettle scene got me more than I expected too. Not because it's some important object, but because that's when you really feel how much of their lives had blended together without either of them noticing. Suddenly they have to decide which things are hers, which things are his, what stays, what goes, and all those tiny ordinary objects start exposing how attached they actually are. But I still think Claire was right to leave. If she had stayed just because separating everything felt sad, they would always have this question hanging over them. Do we actually keep choosing each other? Or are we together because we wake up 10 feet apart and dinner happens automatically? Moving out answered that. Now Noah has to call her. Claire has to decide whether she wants to come over. Friday night isn't automatically theirs anymore. And the fact that they still keep choosing each other after all of that is what convinced me much more than the first kiss did. I also like that Claire didn't turn the new apartment into some relationship test where Noah had to visit a certain number of times or prove himself constantly. She wanted independence, not a game. And Noah eventually understood that supporting her decision didn't mean he liked it. He could hate the fact that she was leaving and still respect that she wanted her own place. That felt pretty mature to me, and honestly, the ending was satisfying because when Claire shows up dressed for their date, it mirrors the beginning without forcing some huge romantic speech. The first time Noah saw her dressed up, another guy was downstairs and he was still pretending he didn't care. This time, he's the guy she's going out with, and nobody has to pretend anymore. So let me ask you this, because I think this is where people are going to split. If you finally got together with the roommate you'd been secretly in love with, and they still said, I want my own apartment, would you genuinely support that? Or would some part of you be thinking, we just figured this out. Why are we deliberately making it harder?